In this session, we will review some of the operating input items and review some of the unique decision-making tools that can be found within this budget section. As a reminder to the user, operating inputs are typically those variable costs that do vary according to the level of production. They are not purchased or incurred if production is not undertaken. And one of those items can be fertilizer. And fertilizer can be a rather high dollar ticket within our operating input section. And we certainly don't want to spend too much money on fertilizer, for instance, but by the same token, we don't want to undercut and apply too little fertilizer, because that may not allow us to achieve or reach our yield goal or forage production requirements. So let's take a look at fertilizer, and by clicking on the fertilizer hyperlink, that will take us to the fertilizer sheet that contains some supporting information of which those costs are based off of. And we can specify up to 8 different fertilizer applications within this fertilizer information table. And you can see that we have some information there that has already been specified for us, but of course they can be modified or edited to better fit and match our operation. And we can go ahead and delete a line. For instance, we can delete nitrogen if we don't typically apply nitrogen on our wheat. We can go ahead and highlight those cells and then just hit the delete key. In this case, let's go ahead and just leave it in there. And then by the same token, if we wish to modify some costs, for instance, change the diammonium phosphate from 582 to 700, well, I can go ahead and just put in $700 in this particular cell. But really the preferred method is to go ahead and double click on that particular line, and that will bring up a pop-up form that does reflect a database that contains all the information that is shown within our information table on our sheet. And that contains, once again, all the supporting information, has the same fields here in the pop-up form that is shown in our information table. And if we want to change any of the supporting information items here, we can do so within the pop-up form. And if we want to change that to $700, we can do that in this particular field. And then in doing so, by clicking OK, we can, for future sessions, save that information and retrieve that information for future reference. So one of the useful aspects of having yellow cells here is that they are unique in the sense of having a database behind those cells, and we can use those cells and that database for future reference. We feel that that's a very useful tool. We can build a unique database that is pertinent to our operation as like no other, but we can still fall back on the default information as necessary. The other important feature within this fertilizer sheet is the fact that we have a fertilizer calculator. And what this calculator does is that it automatically calculates the amount of nitrogen-based fertilizer that is calculated in this first line shown here for urea in this situation, which is based on just the amount of actual N that is required depending on our yield goal and forage production requirements, and that is shown here by 88 pounds of actual N. And this number is calculated using a formula, and it's based on some research-based information developed at Oklahoma State University. We can also enter in our phosphorus and potassium recommendations based on our soil test. And this is also a very, I think, important rationale of using soil tests, because soil tests can very quickly make or save us some money when it comes to fertilizer applications. And we can see here that if we do have some residual soil nitrogen that we have tested for, the default is 0, but we could change that so to say 10 pounds for instance. Well, we can see very quickly that based on that additional nitrogen that is available and the other nitrogen based applications that are being applied here with either via DAP or nitrogen over the top, our urea applications can be reduced. And so that once again is a very important feature and shows the usefulness of conducting soil tests. Now, we don't necessarily have to use 128 pounds of urea. If we decide to, say, override that with a manual calculation, we can choose to do so. And then if we say, well, let's go ahead and just apply 100 pounds of urea instead of that 128 pounds that we had shown previously. Well, in this situation, it really does recommend, as shown here, that we should have additional nitrogen being applied, either via these two blends that contain nitrogen or even urea in addition to that. So we really need some additional nitrogen coming from somewhere. By the same token, if we applied, say, 200 pounds of urea, well, then it goes to show us that we actually have too much nitrogen that is being applied, and maybe we're wasting dollars, and we're wasting a nitrogen application by just applying way too much actual nitrogen than what we really need based on our recommendations shown in this cell right here. So this will hopefully show you the user that you can make or save yourself some money and do some quick and dirty what-ifs concerning some fertilizer blends. This is not an optimization tool. It's not a cost minimization routine where we can come up with the least cost for our fertilizer costs. But we can do some what-ifs, different fertilizer blends and amounts at different prices to come up with a least cost, or at least to lower our overall cost and still meet our yield and forage production goals as shown right here. So let's go ahead and turn the fertilizer calculator back on, and so then we have about $63 worth of fertilizer costs shown here. If you need more information in regards to where these numbers are coming from, you can click on the fertilizer rates button, and we do have some additional supporting information shown here, as well as the publication via the web right here. So with that, let's go ahead and return to the budget. And this concludes this session on operating inputs, and you can very quickly see that the methodology in entering your user-based information is similar to, say, the production section, but it does contain additional features that we feel will be a good reference for you in future sessions down the road.